Next up, we have another keynote presentation from Rob Rakowitz. Hopefully, I pronounced it correct. Co-founder and initiative lead at GARM, a Global Alliance for Responsible Media, which is an initiative of the WFA, the World Federation of Advertising. He will help to showcase some of the concrete next steps industry associations have been taking to support the industry. Rob, are you with us? There you are. Yeah, there you are. Hopefully it's not too early in the morning on your side. Welcome, and I'm looking forward to your presentation. Thanks for being with us.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Stefan. And thank you, Lauren, and thank you, Dimitris, for having us in to talk about our joined up efforts. You may know GARM around brand safety. So the Global Alliance for Responsible Media, which we started at the WFA around 5 years. It'll be this June. What we've been driving is advertiser-led, industry-wide change and standards around some of our systemic challenges. You will have maybe know GARM around our key work in this space. But what we're here to do is talk about how we're collaborating on this next phase of work. And it's what we're calling uncommon collaboration for media sustainability. We talk a lot about uncommon collaboration in terms of the way that we've brought the industry together. And what I have is a few slides to help illustrate some of the work that we've been driving over most recently. As I mentioned, we started out around 5 years ago to drive uncommon collaboration around brand safety. In this, we've now brought over 200 companies together to make sure that there's increased what we would say is transparency, control, and accountability around some of the key systemic issues. And that's become a thread of DNA for us in terms of our work. And we've been able to drive this across major work streams, whether it's our work around definitions, which is effectively set a common framework on brand safety and suitability, our work on measurement to make sure that there is a common way to report on advertising, as well as consumer safety on the platforms, our work on common tools and standards around adjacency, and then finally, the work that we've been driving on audit and verification. And we've been able to progress the work. We've been able to keep it at pace, addressing not only endemic content, but also some of the new issues that have come up, whether it's about making sure that approaches around brand safety and suitability don't stymie efforts like on D&I, making sure that our work keeps pace with technical evolutions in the space of generative AI. And that's been just our overall journey on the brand safety side. But most importantly, when you look at it, what we've been able to do is address what we would say is marketplace inefficiencies. And really what we've been able to do is go into what we would say are Tower of Babel scenarios, where there is a complete fragmentation and incompatibility of standards over to what we've been driving, which is a Rosetta Stone operating model. And it's what we're trying to say here is that, yes, there can be multiple standards at play, but there needs to be a common reference point. Individual companies can drive individual standards, but there needs to fundamentally be that mechanism for transparency, and that will drive the mechanisms for both control as well as accountability. And that's been basically our overall journey in the brand safety space. And what we've actually noticed is that in the sustainability marketplace relative to media is that this is where we're starting to see. And I think that most recently, the need for IAB Europe to even consider a gap analysis and some of the findings therein, which I know were launched today, it points to the fact that we are facing into a bit of a Tower of Babel scenario. Now, as you can imagine, just the lead out from the conversation prior, what we're dealing with is technical standards. And I like to talk about the media industry as hitting three rooms. The first room is the engine room, which is those technical standards that we deal with within the industry. But more importantly, it's the overall link over to the boardroom, whether it's from a sort of values perspective, a non-financial marketing compliance perspective, or even a regulatory compliance perspective, which we heard about just earlier. But more importantly, is that these issues knock on to the living room, the sort of individual life of the consumer. Now, as you can imagine, technical issues around brand safety or media sustainability, we're facing in on this on a sort of media plan and buy perspective. We're thinking about what this means to an overall marketer, over to an overall platform or media seller, or over to an agency. But at the end of the day, this does actually impact corporations in the C-suite as well as individual consumers. But why sustainability, and why now, and why together? I think first and foremost is what we've been seeing is that there's a lot of data variability and incompatibility in the marketplace. So a lot of the solutions that are out there right now, what they've been driving is a good deal of variance. And I'll give a little bit of an analogy. One of our global marketing members in a board meeting was talking about sort of some of the recent sustainability work that they did. And this was about a year ago. They were working with two different agency holding companies, as well as an independent in the media sustainability space. And what they saw was, from the same ad insertion, same ad unit on the same website, a difference in sixfold in terms of the greenhouse gas estimations from that single paid media insertion. Taken down at a national level, that variance grew from 6% over to 20%. So just in a marketplace where these solutions are highly developed, is where we're seeing that variance actually increased. Now, as we saw just earlier, there are going to be reporting requirements, whether it's going up to from a media director over to a sustainability officer, or whether it's going to a financial market. We know that the European commissions, we know that legislation in California and lookalike models in Illinois and New York are going to drive this level of disclosure. And we see that we're looking at basically a 12 to 18 month cycle in terms of when the first data is going to come in. So imagine being that media director and then having to turn around to a chief sustainability officer and saying, hey, listen, this is our scope 3 from media planning and buying, and it needs to go into our report. Now, you can imagine the data variance that we just talked about before. It could probably give you a serious case of anxiety in terms of how reliable is that data. Now, going forward, as you can imagine, this stuff is going to support a new sort of take on media quality, which is why we need to work together now and making sure that, at the very least, there is transparency on why that variance might exist, and give advertisers and agencies the tools so that if they do need to combine the data, is that they're doing it in an accurate way. Because the last thing anybody wants to do is either mislead an organization, mislead consumers, or mislead regulators in terms of work that needs to be done on behalf of the industry and in the interest of society overall. And that's really our leaping off point in terms of the work that we've been doing. And the journey that we've taken over the last year or so is that basically when AdNet Zero launched, much like IAB Europe, WFA was part of the group that helped launch it. And we had been in series of consultations to help AdNet Zero stand up priority 3, which is around greenhouse gas emissions from media activity. Over the course of some consultations, we determined, hey, listen, WFA, as a board member, we have GARM. It's actually built up a considerable understanding of how to develop voluntary industry standards in a consultative process. So in February of last year, we decided, hey, listen, why don't we actually combine and power up these efforts and making sure that GARM is helping AdNet Zero in a unique way. So we started off that work. And very quickly, what we were able to turn around last year was a collection of best practices, a quick action guide. And this quick action guide proposes 10 voluntary steps that advertisers, agencies, as well as media owners can take to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions from media basically at day 0. These are voluntary steps. We would encourage you guys to review them. They're available on both the AdNet Zero as well as the WFA website. And some of the organizations in this conference actually helped contribute to it. So we had over 40 companies input in, and we were able to reduce this down to 10 voluntary steps. But more importantly, is since October of this year, and as we kicked it off in August with some research, is we've been building towards a sustainable media framework, which is basically powered up by a series of solutions that we've been able to identify as being necessary for the industry. These frameworks will be going live in June of this year in Cannes. We welcome you guys to get involved. We are thankful that IB Europe has been part of the journey and is in part of all of the working groups that we have established in helping us drive these standards. Now, I think it's really important to note is that why did we get involved also is because we wanted to make sure that this process and this framework that it works for all media types and it works for all markets. We need to make sure that we're treating all channels equally. We need to make sure that we're plotting a path and a roadmap for each of the markets to making sure that there is adequate disclosure and first-party reporting relative to greenhouse gas emissions. So ad sellers can properly disclose and ad buyers can properly account from the greenhouse gas emissions from their work. Now, there is a series of 6 different working groups that we kicked off. So just really quickly, there's metric and methodology, which is set up to determine the bounds of measurement, the metric, as well as the methodology. And again, we're working this for 8 different major media types. The goal here is that we have frameworks as well as emission factors and are able to identify the data sources to power them up, whether it's coming from an LCA or it's coming from an actual media seller itself. The goal here is that not only will we have these frameworks, but we will also have voluntary formula which the marketplace can then use to either power up their calculators or use as a reference point. Second working group that we have is around data collection. So how do we actually streamline the process for first-party data collection? Because as we know, there are over 30 different solutions providers that are out there in the media greenhouse gas emission space right now. And you can imagine getting 30 different varying request forms for data can probably be mind-boggling. So what we've agreed to do here is create a common base plate off of which each of those providers can build from. But what it will do is radically streamline the data collection process. In terms of data access, one of the other things is recognizing that we need to seamlessly transmit the data and eventually build over to a lifecycle assessment database over the long term. But we are pursuing steps in the interim to help power up media planning and buying and reporting processes, whether it's an agency use case, an ad tech use case, a solutions provider use case, or an advertiser themselves. An important thing that we also know is just given some of the scrutiny around these metrics is making sure that the data that's coming into the system and going out of the system is accurate. So we have stood up an effort around audit and verification. We are going to be monitoring the implementation of our solutions. And then finally, is creating transparency around the solutions that are out in the marketplace. And this is where there's a lot of shared DNA and spirit. With the gap analysis that was recently published, we need to make sure that advertisers, agencies, as well as publishers understand the scope, understand the channels, understand the underlying methodology, and whether or not there's been scientific validation of some of the solutions that are out there right now. So then we can go back over to that marketer who's been working with the 2 different agency holdcos, as well as the independent, and be able to understand why is there that difference of 6-fold, and should that actually be shrinking? And if they actually need to take it on board themselves, how would they be able to deal with their own first-party greenhouse gas emissions calculations? So that's overall sort of the 6 working groups that we have. They are poised to deliver the first round of their deliverables for Cannes this year in June. Now, you might be sitting in the audience and wondering, okay, is this actually going to happen overnight? And no, I think much in line with the rolling agenda or the time frame that there is in terms of compliance on the regulatory side, the transformation agenda within the industry really boils down to 3 main phases that we're looking at. And the first one is understand and benchmark. And it's really important that the industry starts to look and starts to collect the data and understands where they sit today. The second phase, which sits literally right on top of this one, which is to challenge as well as reduce. Challenge to produce the data and then driving the reductions in terms of organic individual operations. So making sure that everybody is driving towards a more sustainable value chain by their own individual operations. Then finally, is really getting into sort of the specifics of emissions from individual insertions and individual ad unit types that would then allow for optimization. Now, one of the things that we are clear about is that, look, at the end of the day, a media plan and media buy needs to be driving consumer reach as well as a profit-oriented behavior change. That that media sustainability is going to be a media quality metric. It is not going to be a sort of core KPI. We encourage media buyers as well as sellers to take that advice into account, and making sure that we drive this change in a way that honors the fact that we are looking at media outcomes and then reaching them in a more sustainable way. So this is the journey that we're on right now at the moment. We are thankful to Ad Net Zero. We are thankful to the 50 or so companies that are working with us in each of the 6 working groups right now. Those are all powered up by volunteers. And we've been thankful for a lot of the work that we've been driving together, specifically in the partnership that we've been nurturing with IAB Europe. That overall is just an overview of our work to date, and I will pass back over to you guys, Stefan.
Thank you very much, Rob. Do we have some questions in the audience? So far, not, but we have a few minutes. Rob, thank you again for sharing these insights and also into your work that's happening at GARM and the development of the initiative. It's always a pleasure to see and hear how ambitious you are in bringing together as many people as possible from across the media industry. And as far as I've heard, we are, as IAB, also very happy to support this initiative and looking forward to our ongoing collaboration. And even though we have an environmental impact focus today, let me ask you a question about social and societal impact. Do you see GARM taking on social issues with a similar intensity to the ecological footprint in the future?
For now, we're humble and happy with the work remit that we have right now relative to brand safety as well as environmental sustainability. I think that those are the sort of 2 core issues that we need to focus in on. I think that there was discussion prior around some of the more hot button issues that can tend to be politicized. And this is something that we need to make sure as an industry association that we're completely cognizant of, is that really what we need to do is enhance transparency as well as control. So individual companies can drive their values through industry. I do think that the areas that we are concerned about, and this probably fits more natively within the brand safety space, is areas around sort of youth safety, making sure that there is a containment on disinformation and support for journalism, and then also being able to make sure that brands as well as individuals are protected in this new era of Gen AI. So I do think that there are a lot of issues that are societal in nature that we are actively working through on the brand safety side. So right now it's those are the 2 major work streams. We do feel like there's plenty of bread to butter there, if you will, in terms of some of the topics, but these are the main focus areas that we've been able to prioritize, especially from an ESG perspective.
Yeah, thank you. I feel it totally. Earlier, we had the question regarding the enormous environmental impact of ad fraud.
Yeah.
The question was, do any measurement service tackle ad fraud as service separate reporting? Do you see there's some developments regarding ad fraud in the market?
Yeah, I think that as we get into it, I think that areas of ad fraud basically bring into play a lot of different issues, which one is around sustainability, financial fraud, et cetera. We fully endorse a lot of the work that's been driven from a transparency perspective, whether it's through the work of ANA or through ISBA. I think that it's also forced us to perhaps revisit and say, Look, are our standards on ad fraud, are they fit for purpose today, and are they fit for future? I do think that a lot of the concerns around MFA, a lot of the concerns around ad fraud, a lot of the concerns around bot networks, they do have us reconsider whether or not the standards that we have today around SIVT, et cetera, which I think have been adequately framed for when they were developed and delivered on at current, is whether or not they're future facing enough. And I think that it is probably the right sort of question, much in the way that we're looking at the brand safety side of it and saying, hey, listen, yeah, we are happy with the content definitions, but does Gen AI trigger us to think about the way that brand safety and suitability are being delivered? So I think much in the way that we've seen advancements on the tech side is that this is a healthy opportunity for us to look at ad fraud and some of the standards there and then update them. Because I think that the viewability standards, the SIVT standards that have been developed, they have been really good building blocks, but they're a floor, they shouldn't be a ceiling, and we should continue to build up from there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. At least I think many of these things we are discussing are more interacted and interwoved as we thought in the last years. Things are coming more together. And that's great. We've gotten some more questions now. Is GARM looking at standardizing climate impact measurements only for the moment, or intend to have a broader look at environmental impact as a whole? Life cycle, water, soil, air, radiation. Sorry if already answered. No, as far as I've heard, it's not answered.
Yeah, this is really good question, because I think the first and foremost is it's almost a little bit of a bottoms up approach, because I think by driving a standardized framework, what it will allow for is individual campaigns to be measured from a greenhouse gas impact perspective. As the data becomes more accurate and as the supply of data becomes more widespread, so e.g., we have more than the large scale sort of media play entities in each of the channels and each of the markets putting into the data. As we have that steady supply of information, we will be able to start to size up what is the greenhouse gas emissions from media in market A, in market B, in market C, with what sense of level of coverage. So I do think that is going to be a long-term element here, is that yes, we will be able to build towards that, but we have to start small, we have to start humble, and we have to start driving that forward. And I think that some of the things that, folks like Dimitris and I have seen is that there's been really great marketplace development in terms of how we'd like to measure, but the critical components, which is data, have not been there. And it almost becomes one of these things where we've seen a little bit of an intellectual exercise, which is here's how we think we can measure and here's how we think we can optimize. But without the data, you're just guessing. And I think this has also been some of the work that we've all uncovered together in terms of surveying the marketplace and spending time with the suppliers. It's absolutely been positive intent. Don't get us wrong. And I think everybody is trying to do the right thing for the industry. But if you don't have the accurate sort of first party data in terms of what media seller A's greenhouse gas emissions were at an enterprise level, and you're then being able to isolate out what is the ad selling side of it, we're doing guesstimations. And that's really where it becomes dangerous, because if the solutions provider is saying, hey, listen, we can help you optimize your plan, and we're going to cut out X number of websites or X number of publications or X number of sites of out of home. And if you then start to say, where are you getting your data? And if it starts to become inferred, then that's actually where we start to get over our skis. And then what we end up doing is you have almost this crossover from positive intent and wanting to do good to overstating what you're able to actually do accurately. And then you go back over to this very large scale global advertiser who's then having to turn around to their chief sustainability officer and saying, hey, listen, I went from 100 to 100 in terms of my greenhouse gas emissions. Okay, but prove it to me. And then if it's all based on inferred data, it's, oh gosh, guys, are we perhaps greenwashing ourselves? Yeah. And that's what we don't want to do.
Excellent answer. Many hints why we are making these efforts for the gap analysis in the last months. And we have one last question, just 1.5 minutes to go, so probably keep it short. Thanks for the presentation. How likely it will be that GARM will represent the standard industry measurement framework regarding the setting of sustainability standards until June 2024 to ensure one standard instead of many within the sustainability ecosystems?
Beautiful question. And it's actually really funny. So one of the things that we've done is right now we've kicked off a socialization process. We've spoken with major trade organizations that represent each of the channels. IEP is obviously one of them, EGTA as others, and you can imagine the list goes on and on based on media types. And we've also spoken with the solutions providers. Now, in the sort of feedback form that we've gotten, we've actually asked them, what is the likelihood of you to, based on what you've seen, to use this as an industry standard? We have 64% of the marketplace indicating right now that they will, out of the gate, sort of based on what they've seen, adopt the GARM AdNet Zero media sustainability standard. An additional 32% are supportive of the work and are waiting for further developments and are likely to adopt it. Only 6%, which is actually only 2 companies at the moment, are stating that their solution actually goes above and beyond. They'll continue to operate, but they will map. So just to give you a sense that we do actually, when you look at the top 2 box, 94% is a quick achievement for AdNet Zero and GARM to pull off in about a year's time. So we're quite impressed, humbled, proud, excited, scared even in terms of the marketplace support for what we're producing has around it.
Thank you very much. I think for everyone, sustainability without the big portion of optimistic attitude is nothing. Stay as you are, and I'm looking forward to see you next time. Thank you.